All right, it is 3:01. Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar, Modernizing Your Procurement Office. Thank you for taking time out of your busy day to join us. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to explain the format of today's webinar. All attendees are muted. Throughout the presentation, you can enter any comments into the chat box. If you'd like to ask us a question, please type it into the Q&A box at the bottom of your window. Questions may be answered as we go along, and we'll also have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. Your feedback is very valuable to us here at NASPO, so at the close of today's webinar, you will be asked to complete a very brief questionnaire. Additionally, this webinar is good for one contact hour. To get your certificate for that contact hour, simply complete the questionnaire. I am very pleased to introduce my esteemed guest speakers who will be joining me in presenting today. Today, we are very honored to have with us Tijan Simpson. Tijan has over 17 years of contracts and procurement experience, which includes the Georgia Department of Transportation, Georgia Tech, Xerox Global Procurement, Metropolitan Atlanta Rapid Transit Authority, or MARTA, and of course, the Georgia Department of Administrative Services. Currently, she is the manager of Information Technology statewide sourcing team in the State Purchasing Office of the Georgia Department of Administrative Services. The Information Technology team executes complex contracts such as cloud solutions, end-user computing, public safety technology, and telehealth. That portfolio is comprised of 21 statewide contract markets with an approximate annual spend of $794 million. Also joining me today is David O'Neill. David is the State Chief Procurement Officer for the Division of Purchase and Contracts, or P&C for short. In this role, he oversees the acquisition and management of state goods and services, as well as P&C's subdivisions, including strategic sourcing, procurement education, risk and compliance management, contract management, and systems support. He joined the North Carolina Department of Administration in 2016 as a strategic sourcing specialist for the Division of Purchase and Contract, and in 2017 was promoted to State Procurement Manager 1, where he led and managed a team of state procurement specialists. In November of 2019, David was selected to be the division's chief learning officer, the role he held until his appointment as the state chief procurement officer. Prior to joining the Department of Administration team, David worked with the Wake County Public Schools Purchasing Office, say that 10 times fast, holding both the Senior Administrator and Warehouse Operation Manager titles. While at Wake County, he was able to obtain the Certified Local Government Purchasing Officer, CLGPO certification, along with being an LGFCU fellow. He has over 10 years of state government experience, along with over 15 years of private sector knowledge in supply chain and logistics. He has a bachelor's degree in business administration with a specialization in management and organizational development from Mount Olive College. He's a certified public manager, or CPM, and was most recently obtained his Certified Public Procurement Officer, or CPPO certification. So as you can see, we have some real procurement experts with us today. And we're very excited to have you here with us too. So let's get started. As I mentioned, this is Modernizing Your Procurement Office. My name is Talise Gillum. I am a procurement content manager with NASPO. Just a bit about NASPO. We are a 501c3 nonprofit association dedicated to elevating and strengthening the public procurement profession through education, professional development, and innovation, which is what we're here to talk about today. Check us out at naspo.org. Our learning objectives today will be to briefly review NASPO's top 10 priorities for procurement in 2024, We're going to discuss 5 areas where modernization is needed and some ways to update those procurement policies, procedures, and techniques. We're going to discover ways that states are using technologies to update the procurement processes. We're going to look at a list of resources to support your modernization efforts. And of course, we're going to review other NASPO resources that may be helpful to you. All of the links displayed throughout this presentation are clickable for review at your convenience. We'll also make a copy of the slide deck available after this webinar. So every year, NASPO publishes a list of the top 10 priorities as determined on priority rankings from each state's CPO. For this year, 2024, the number 1 priority is the modernization of procurement processes. And in each office, there are some areas where modernization is necessary. And we'd like to share some strategies that the offices can use that are practical, that are relatively easy to implement, and economical. Now, we recognize that these strategies are not a one-size-fits-all approach. However, with the rapid advancement of technology, it's not a topic that anybody can afford to overlook anymore. And as procurement staff, it is our duty to be good stewards of the taxpayer dollars. And modernization is not just common sense anymore. It makes better usage of those dollars with efficient use of the state resources. Now, we say relatively easy because it sounds simple, and we realize that it may come with different challenges based on your budget, your state's procurement code, your office size, and other constraints. So with that, let's move on to our first section, our first learning objective: to modernize your procurement office, 5 areas and strategies to start. The number 1 area is training. Retrain your personnel. If your staff is new to the profession or they aren't aware of the latest trends and improvements to procurement processes, there's a lot of information that they may be missing out on. And it's no longer an option to whether or not certain employees who are less tech savvy or perhaps a bit tech averse receive training on the latest technological advances that will affect your procurement office. A big part of the modernizing your procurement office trend is going to include the procurement staff themselves becoming more data literate and proficient, because the data transformation of your office won't be able to succeed without it. Now, of course, nobody has to become a data wizard overnight, but a baseline of data literacy should be established. Your state offices should implement ongoing training, which should include your current policies and procedures regarding e-procurement, procurement document management, cybersecurity current events, state digitation requirements, artificial intelligence, of course, and machine learning. These are all areas that have seen a significant technological advance within the past 2 years. And of course, if possible, you should include your legal staff, your legal counsel, any managers and other state officials in your procurement training. Now, each of these bullet points will link you to either an article or a state website as an example of an implementation of these new technologies so that you can see a real-world practical usage of them in action. If your state doesn't have the ability or the budget to send your staff to outside training, you can take advantage of the many resources that are available, and we have a lot of resources linked here in this presentation for you. Number 2, update your policies and procedures based on new technology. Speaking of technological advances, take a look at your procurement policies and procedures. Have they kept up? We know that sometimes technology adoption can happen slower in the public sector, and we can tend to get stuck in the way that we've always done things, sometimes out of convenience, sometimes for other factors. It's in every state's best interest to review and revise their procurement policies on an ongoing basis. Think about it. Think about how much you used to spend on copier contracts then versus now. You're likely spending a lot less because you're copying and printing a lot less. That's why these days with the rapid advance of technology, what you don't know or don't implement could cost you a lot of time and money. As I mentioned in the beginning, we've got some real experts joining us today. My first esteemed guest speaker, Tejan Simpson from the great state of Georgia, is going to share with you some key considerations to remember when you're updating your policies and procedures to incorporate new technology. Tejan?
Thank you, Talise, and thank you all for being here. I have just a few things that I'd like to share with you all. And one, of course, being with regards to considerations on updating policies and procedures. So it always is kind of ominous sounding when we talk about doing any type of major changes and how people are going to react and adopt those things. And so the key to adoption is involvement. The more involved employees are, the more likely they are to accept and implement those changes. Second is clearly demonstrating the benefits of the change as it relates to their current state. For example, we've heard quite a lot about AI in the last couple of years, but how often do you actually hear about how it's going to benefit your day-to-day duties and tasks versus it being just this general amorphous, oh, it's great, everybody should use it. So when you are making those connections for people, then they're more willing and more readily adopting things because they can see how it will make a difference in their actual daily work. So in order to do that, then you have to ask questions such as those that are on the screen. How are you currently using technology? What are you using it for? Are we, I believe Talise mentioned in a prior slide, do we already have certain things that we just are not using to their full benefit? Or perhaps there's things that need to be turned on or upgraded? And what are the risks of using these technologies? Doesn't mean that you shouldn't use them, but you want to be aware of those risks because all of those things need to be included or addressed in that new policy and procedure will go in accordance with that technology update. And then, of course, is there going to be a need for there to be third-party or indirect use of the technology? So that being said, okay, I'll talk some more until the next slide, please. Thank you. So you want to design the technology policies and procedures around the way the organization runs. So not just incorporating employees into those different questions that are being asked and getting across to them how beneficial it is, but also writing it in alignment with the way the organization runs, not just that unit that might be using the technology, but also those that are ancillary to it, meaning that they either at the beginning or the end of the process or somewhere in between. So maybe their products are not changing, but they are impacted by any changes that are happening within the office that is changing. And you want to make sure that there's going to be a seamless transition in that adjustment, whether it's the technology, the policy, or the procedure. Of course, relevant laws, we always have to include and consider those things and ensuring that the proper parties are communicated with to be aware of what is changing and why, and if they have any concerns that those are addressed as well. In that way, you want to devise a plan that is inclusive of the different parties, ramping up the information, socializing what's going to change, and fielding on any of those questions that might be cause for concern or pushback. The other method you want to utilize is training, of course, for all those that are going to be involved so that they are well equipped, because sometimes they don't comply because they don't have the tools to know how things are supposed to be utilized. And we want to make sure that we are arming people with that information and those skills and tools to use the new products to the best of their ability. And then also, again, you want to make sure that anybody that is being impacted, even if they're not directly utilizing those new products or upgraded products, that they are aware of the changes and that they have a voice in the process to say, well, how's this going to impact us? What do we need to do differently? And if there's nothing, then that's great to let them know that. But if there is something, then you definitely want to include that in the procedure, as well as communicating that out in socialization as well as training. And with that, I'll hand it back over to Talise. Oh, Talise, I wasn't sure. There's a hand up. I don't know if you're taking questions now or at the end.
Yeah, we'll address any of the comments in the Q or the questions in the Q&A box as we go along, as we're able. So that takes us to number 3, which is the systems that you're using, promoting the usage of new technology. Take a look at the systems that you're using. How old are they? As I previously mentioned, there have been many technological advances that can enhance the day-to-day realities of procurement offices. Back when I was in high school, one of the first programming languages I ever learned to use was COBOL. I remember feeling very accomplished that I knew a programming language back then. I think that was 1996. And once I got out of college and into the procurement world, I never imagined that I'd still need to use COBOL, because some of the public agencies that I worked for 10, 15, 20 years later would still be using COBOL. And as recently as 2023, there are some public agencies that are still using COBOL, if you can believe it. I'm sure you can. So some public agencies are still using those outdated systems because implementation of new systems is a daunting and expensive task. And that has been made much easier and less expensive by way of software as a service or cloud-based distributing or cloud-based delivery models. I don't know if you remember some of those old systems like Lotus Notes. I'm kind of telling my age here. I'm also telling my age in that my earrings are tiny cassettes that say best of the 80s. Just because the 80s was cool doesn't mean we have to stay with those old legacy systems. So promote the usage of new technology where you can. And sometimes promoting the usage of new technology is as simple as using the technologies that you already have access to. For example, using some of the other functions of Microsoft Office, like in Outlook, there is a task function that you can use, or when you communicate with suppliers about solicitations, using the email system that you already have to communicate so that you have a written record of any communication with suppliers, and strictly emailing about open and active solicitations for documentation purposes, or Microsoft OneNote, or any other of the built-in organization tools that you already have. So we have a quick poll for you now, just a simple yes or no question. That poll come up on the screen. And it is there technology that your office currently has access to that you're not using? We'll let you get a chance to answer that. Some interesting answers coming through there. The yeses are looks like the yeses are taking it. And I think if the majority of the answers were no, we probably wouldn't be doing this webinar, right, friends? Right. Yeah, that's about what I thought. That's about what I thought. So thanks for answering that poll for us. If you answered yes to that poll question, if you wouldn't mind, we'd love to know, and you can put your answers right in the chat. How can you incorporate that technology into your workflows? And you can just put your answers or any ideas that you might have into the chat. Who knows, you might spark some ideas for your colleagues who are also on the webinar. And these are just some things to think about when we say promoting the usage of new technology that doesn't necessarily include having to go out and purchase a whole new system. Using technology sometimes is just as simple as looking around at what you already have and using it. All right. So moving on, number 4, in our list of modernization strategies and technology usage, reevaluate your procurement cycle for inefficiencies. Looks like we've got our poll still up there. So reevaluating your procurement cycle for inefficiencies, take a look at how long it takes for a project to go from initiation to a signed contract. Do your end user agencies tend to have concern about how long it takes? Probably. What are some of the issues that slow your processes down? I'm sure you could probably all say similar things. Are there areas in your solicitation, evaluation, or negotiation processes that could be improved? Probably yes. So if you're not sure and you're interested in hearing about ways to make your procurement cycle more efficient, I included a link there in the word improve that will take you to an online peer roundtable hosted by the Harvard Procurement Excellence Network that's happening on July 30th. That you can register for, where the conversation will be discussing process efficiency challenges and trying to come up with creative solutions. We've got a lot more resources like that for you coming up later in the presentation. And speaking of your procurement cycle, are you considering cybersecurity throughout the process? Ideally, cybersecurity considerations should not start at the time you're considering the terms and conditions of the contract or once the project starts. It's a good idea to start talking about them from the inception of the project before you release your solicitation. Our expert guest, Tijan, is back to give us some strategies to include cybersecurity in your solicitation. Tijan?
Thank you, Talise. So this is always an interesting topic whenever we're getting together at the various NASPO conferences, how to address the different concerns when doing the actual sourcing process for technology. And so one of the things that I believe in as a very long-term public servant is utilizing the resources that we have, which is a no-cost option. So, of course, the first thing you want to do is talk to the entities within your state that may already have some strategies, because by virtue of what's happening in their organization, they've been pushed to adopt some changes rapidly. And so they have some lessons learned. They have some strategies that they can share. And sometimes it can be a good discussion amongst various entities to share what they've used, what's worked, what hasn't worked, what they would have done differently, similar to what we do in any of our other solicitations. The other thing is good for just ongoing is to form a council of those in your state that regularly, like maybe your technical universities or colleges or entities that tend to be more on the cutting edge of technology. They will pretty regularly have different pools of experience to be able to share and advise on. And the other thing that's great, especially if you are like the purchasing authority, is that when you have different agencies who don't necessarily have those same resources, you can leverage that council to help them in being able to address certain things that are coming up in their sourcing challenges when it comes to technology. You want to make it easy on yourself by basing requirements in your solicitations on government standards. We often in the state of Georgia utilize NIST and FSMA, high trust for any healthcare related technology. And there's some other things out there that you can utilize depending on the particular market of the technology. But the ones that are most consistently utilized are the NIST and FSMA. And that helps you in one way that you're meeting a standard that's common in the market, but also that it evolves with the market and with technology. So therefore, as the contract goes through its life cycle, those standards will continue to be developed as needed as the technology changes. You also want to make sure that you're aware and applying any relevant policies and laws of your state. There's differences across different states. Like in Georgia, we have a law that says we don't recognize hyperlinks as being enforceable in the courts, in Georgia courts. And so those are types of things that we always make sure that we reference in our documents and our solicitations and contracts. Those things help you to not have to have those arguments, because we all have that conversation with suppliers where they're pushing back and we say, sorry, it's a law, we can't help it, you got to comply, there's nothing we can do. So that's always a shortcut to getting through some of those more difficult negotiations, as well as making sure that you're in compliance right up front without having to have that conversation on the back end. Next slide, please. So that being said, you want to make sure that any of those executable actions, such as being NIST compliant, you want to base your mandatory score requirements on those things to say, okay, we're saying that you have to do these things, tell us how you're going to comply. So not enough to just say you have to do them all the time. Sometimes you actually need to be able to rate or score how they're going to make that happen, just to be able to know that they have a business model that is already consistent with those standards. And then you also want to have them disclose any information about technologies that they might be utilizing that is sensitive to your state. So a lot of things that are coming up now, of course, are AI related. And sometimes they're obvious things that we're signing up for, like you might want AI generated reporting. But there also may be uses of AI that are included by the supplier that are not necessarily desirable to the state. Some of you may have read the article where it said that there was universities that found out that their vending machines had AI technology that was scanning the faces of the students and monitoring what products they were focusing on to see what was going to be more of interest to the students. And so there's a number of things that are a problem with that. Of course, the fact that they're students, and it goes on from there. And what are they doing with that information? How is it protected, and so on? And so you want to make sure that you're basically telling the supplier, we need to know what you're using in your providing of services and goods, that all needs to be disclosed, particularly these things, whatever those things are that your laws or policies have concerns about, and that anything that is included as active consent and not an opt-in, meaning that it has to be, if you use our vernacular, that it has to be done by amendment and not just by a click through or by us saying we're okay with this one thing, then it's going to apply to all. Anytime there's going to be any new use of something, that it needs to be communicated and agreed upon by amendment. So therefore, all parties are informed. And I will hand it back over to Talise to talk further.
Thanks, Tajan. Last but not least, number 5 is innovation. You must commit to continuous improvement. None of the topics or the practices that we've talked about is a one and done fix, especially as it pertains to staying up to date with training on the usage of the latest technology. It requires a commitment to staying informed. And it also requires being willing to reevaluate how you might integrate technology into your current practices. Some of you might remember how it felt like a giant leap to go from dot matrix printers to laserjet printers. And now, for the most part, we save and send documents electronically. So that's really what we're talking about here. So moving on to our next learning objective, how technology can update procurement processes. So our first procurement process, or our procurement standard of e-procurement, the state of Florida implemented an e-procurement marketplace called My Florida Marketplace. It provides agency customers with a full service e-procurement platform. We've got the link there for you to check it out at your leisure. Our next topic is procurement document management using robotic process automation. Now, robots are not going to come marching through the office. Rather, it is the usage of machine learning to recognize data in the procurement documents and process that data according to rules set by you, the user. There is a great article in the Wall Street Journal for you to check out, and you can read about how it's saving the state of Tennessee 100,000 hours worth of work, and check that link out when you have a moment. Our next topic is blockchain. It is useful for more than cryptocurrency. Its potential extends far beyond. There are contracts on the blockchain that can automate procurement processes. Read all about Rhode Island's quest to use it to become the first state-level e-government when you have a moment. Of course, the hottest topic of the last 2 years, generative AI. It can be used to analyze massive amounts of data and produce ad hoc reports based on queries by the user. And with that capability, there are a lot of experts that are using it or making a case for usage in procurement to vet suppliers, track performance, identify problematic companies that do the cup and ball trick when they register for usage or for contracts with your company, and of course, detect potential fraud. But you can read about how Connecticut is using it to answer questions on their website using curated internal content documents when you have a moment. And by now, we've all heard of ChatGPT, right? Well, as of May 13th of this year, the company responsible for it, OpenAI, released its latest version, which is GPT-4o. The O stands for Omni, and this new version is their flagship model that can reason across audio, visual, and text cues in real time. This means that it can interact with you in more ways with less lag time or in a more human-like conversational way. And now you can get image and video outputs, something that was not previously available. So if you click the link in the words GPT-4o there in the title, you can check out their OpenAI's website, and you can watch videos where the developers are interacting with GPT-4o in various ways, including one via his phone. And he had the camera on and was showing GPT-4o video of his dog. He told GPT-4o, "This is my dog Bowser." And he proceeded to have a conversation with GPT-4o about what the dog was doing. The dog was playing with a tennis ball, and without any additional information provided to GPT-4o, he proceeded to have a whole conversation about it, where GPT-4o swooned over the dog and provided visual cues and conversation about the color of the ball, the breed of the dog, and conversation about how cute the dog was. And the dog was very cute. So check that out when you have a moment. But let's talk about how this could potentially be useful for procurement. The ability to interact via images or video means that it could be pretty useful to assist you with market research. For example, you could show it a picture of a product and ask it if there are other brands of this thing, or it could provide you with links to the product's website or do price comparisons. For complicated solicitations, you could ask GPT-4o to analyze your specifications and assist you with drafting evaluation criteria. But of course, you would need to be the human person to review them for fairness and accuracy, and you would need to assign the point value to those criteria if that is the way you do your evaluations. And lastly, as I mentioned earlier, since you would want to update your policies and procedures to better align with the newest technology available, GPT-4o can be used to analyze them and provide you with a list of the specific areas that need to be updated. So we've talked a lot about new technology throughout this presentation, and we've mentioned cybersecurity a few times. So I'm mentioning it again. With all these new incredible technological advancements, it's imperative that at the same time, a comparable and concurrent upgrade to your state's cybersecurity measures take place. What I don't want to get lost is the fact that you don't leave yourselves vulnerable with the adoption of new technology. It sounds like it would be something that's a given, but I just don't want anyone to take for granted that anyone automatically knows this. I read a news story about a municipal water plant that faced a cybersecurity incident because they installed a new software to monitor the water treatment system. And the default password was never changed when that new software was installed. The default password was 1234. And I don't mean to disparage anyone, but I just think it is imperative to stress that cybersecurity is very important. So when you get a moment, read the article on Harvard Business Review about ways to improve your cybersecurity standards, and check out how New Mexico has implemented a new executive order to boost their cybersecurity protections. And as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, in the spirit of providing you with as many resources as possible to assist you with your upgrades and modernization of your procurement office, we have an extensive list of resources for you here, and the links for all of these will be put into the chat. And because we're talking about modernization and promoting technology usage, I'd like to bring in my second esteemed guest speaker, the expert in modernization himself, Mr. David O'Neill from the great state of North Carolina, to talk about their state IT standards and their modernization project. David, take it away.
Well, thank you, Talise. Thank you all for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us today to talk about modernizing your office. And the slide previously had a link toward the state IT standards, and those are set by the state of North Carolina's Chief Information Officer. And that particular officer is responsible for planning the framework to develop and publish those IT standards. And what do they include? Well, our current IT standard includes areas such as desktop configurations, domain management, GIS, geographic information systems, identity and access management, IT project management, and vendor management resources. And so that's kind of what our IT office does. And we're talking about modernizing our procurement office. And so not too long ago, October of 2022, the state of North Carolina embarked on a project, a very major project for the state of North Carolina, to replace some of that outdated technology that you heard Talise talking about a little while ago. We started October of 22 and we went live in July of 23. Those dates, months and dates are important because we did a major software implementation from design and development into implementation in around 9 months. And why do we do that? Well, because we needed to replace that outdated technology that we had been utilizing for a very long time. And so our electronic vendor portal, we call it the new EVP or the new electronic vendor portal, did a marvelous job of combining two legacy systems, also known as outdated technology, along with an additional manual paper-based process into a single platform using the Microsoft Power Platform and Microsoft 365, Microsoft Dynamics platform of products. And so what did we combine? Well, we combined an old EVP, right? So that's where vendors went into one system to register to do business with the state. We combined that with what we called our interactive purchasing system, which those were our two major legacy systems. And that IPS system was developed back in 1997. And so Talise said she was showing her age. I'm really going to show my age. It's real obvious for me because you see all the gray and no hair. No, that didn't come about because of this project. However, IPS was built in 1997. And for those of you that are experienced on this call, you will recall that Y2K phenomenon. Remember when all the computers were going to shut down everything in the world because of the date, the year only had 2 digits in it, and we were going to go from 99 to 00, and everything was going to shut down. Well, that's when IPS was built. And IPS served the state of North Carolina wonderfully well for 25 years. But last I checked, we get to retire after 25 years of state service. And so it was time for IPS to retire. So that's what we did. We took EVP and IPS, and part of IPS that we enhanced over the years was our NC bid systems, which was the North Carolina Business Information Delivery System, basically how to submit a bid electronically, along with feature enhancements to combine it into EVP. So what does our EVP tool do? Well, it's a single modern cloud-based platform. It supports the statewide vendor registration, our supplier diversity program, along with our bid awards and bid tabs. Okay, so bid awards, bid tabs, that's public procurement advertisement, evaluation, and award. And we accept all of those electronically. You heard Talise talking about getting rid of dot matrix printers and laser jet printers and doing everything electronically. We're able to do that now more efficiently because we have a paperless, not a paper-based process. In addition to those two major legacy systems into the third, we brought our supplier diversity and small business certification program completely online. So think about having to get all the documentation about a small business or historically underutilized business, their ownership, how that's broken down, all of those paper documents submitted into an office that somebody then has to look at, collate, combine, put in a file cabinet, right? So that is now completely online for our historically underutilized business office. In addition, this portal that we have developed integrates with 15 plus other key state procurement and ERP systems. So we are talking to all of the different accounting systems that are utilized throughout the state of North Carolina. So we were able to consolidate applications into that single low-code, no-code platform, cloud-based platform, not on-prem, but a cloud-based platform, modernizing technology, right? We leveraged our strategic partnerships and we automated processes and brought all of that online. Well, what's been the impact? Like I said, we started this October of 22. We went live July of 23. It's now June of 24. So we're 11 months in. What has this done for the state of North Carolina? Well, as of it's June, so this came out like in May. Our new vendor registrations, because of this portal, have increased 50% per week, which improves competition. It improves the supplier diversity program participation, and it affords us a better opportunity for greater cost savings. We've leveraged automation, those RPAs that Talise mentioned, along with APIs, right? Lovely technology acronyms. Procurement loves acronyms. There's 2 more for you, right? The need to post solicitations to multiple systems because we were posting it in IPS and then in NC Bids and on the Hub website. That has gone away. And so we have saved the state procurement users approximately 1,000 hours per year just in duplicative process elimination. The state supplier diversity certification cycle time, y'all, has gone from over 90 days, which is what, 3 months, to less than half of that. They are averaging 47 days to process a certification from a vendor submitting all of their paperwork. 90 down to 47, less than half of the time, because of the fact we're able to leverage our technology. And finally, those paper-based processes have been brought online which has moved submission for documents. Over 22,000 documents are now completely online, and it eliminated the paper coming into our offices. So that's just a snippet. They gave me 5 to 7 minutes to talk about this. If you want to know more about it, I can get on the soapbox and talk about our EVP program and what it did, how we did it, the platforms we used for hours. But Talise says, David, you got 5. And so I gave you 5. The highlights. If you want to know more, just reach out. We'll be more than happy to share with you what we're doing, how we did it, and how you too can join the Microsoft Power Platform community of practice in developing new tools for your office. Talise, all yours.
Thanks so much for sharing all that information, David. And he will tell you all about it. All you got to do is ask. So, of course, we'd love to share our NASPO resources with you as well. I'm sure you're all familiar with all that we offer. Our Procurement U courses provide education, training, and professional development. Research and innovation publications include the content library, our repository of state practices, or ROSPI, and our state preference repository. We also have the Pulse blog and podcast. Of course, you're all familiar with NASPO Value Point, our cooperative purchasing arm, and our conferences and events, the next of which is our REACH conference to be held in Philadelphia, July 16th through 18th. I mentioned Procurement U. Here's a nice synopsis of the information about what we offer. We have over 83 hours of free contact hours worth of procurement-focused courses and UPPCC certification support. You can find all of that at naspo.org/procurement-u. I mentioned before, the research and innovation team produces our NASPO Pulse blog and podcast, where we talk and write about a myriad of topics, including current trends in procurement, the latest technology, and how it can affect the profession, legal issues, and more. I believe you've met the new host of the NASPO podcast. Also this year, we published our newest edition of our textbook, The Practical Guide for State and Local Government Procurement. When you receive a copy of the slide deck after this webinar is over, both of these images are links that will take you to our website, where you can read our blog, listen to our podcast, or purchase a copy of the Practical Guide. So if you have additional questions or would just like to discuss anything that you have seen here today in the webinar, we have some time for Q&A and discussion. My little friend there says, "What's up?" We'll be checking the chat and the Q&A for questions. So I see a question in the chat: how can I contact you after the session? We will have our contact information on the last slide. We'll be glad to answer any additional questions that you may have. I saw in the Q&A, are AI generated responses accepted by the states? There are a lot of states that are now putting legislation into place to regulate the usage of AI in procurement in particular. So what I would say is consult your local procurement code, talk to your CPO. The safe answer is most likely no, because there's a lot of shuffling and movement around legislating how AI can be used in the procurement space. The problem with it is that AI is not a perfect tool yet, and it tends to make things up. And so if you are generating a response to something and AI gives you an answer that is not real, and you submit that answer and it has made the answer up out of thin air and it is basing the answer on something that doesn't exist, how can you accept that? So the safe answer is probably no, but the best answer is to check with your CPO, consult your local procurement code, and go from there. in the chat. See if we've got any additional questions there. Tashawn or David, any additional things you'd like to add to our discussion?
Well, I thought that what you shared, David, was really interesting because we're like a year behind you, but going through the same thing in state of Georgia. We're replacing our entire ERP system, and it's about 25 years old, and all the things. But we're you guys are on the other side of it now, so it's good to know that although I might be bald, I will make it to the other side.
You will come out on the other side. Now, I will not imply that it was an easy task,
No.
but we had an amazing team established within the state of North Carolina, and managing the change management aspect of this, which we're still going through, and understanding the reluctance to change, right? Because we've got the tool that we replaced has been here since 1997, and there are people that have done procurement in the state of North Carolina with only that system, and so understanding that aspect of this program was critical, and being able to remember that the feedback, constructive criticism, deflection of "we're angry at you" is not necessarily a personal attack, but it's just something that the people have to get used to. And we recognize that. And even in our peak conference, which Talise was there, we asked, like, hey, how is EVP going for you? And some of the response was not as positive as we would want it, but it also gave us the opportunity to really go back and look at, okay, so what have we done? How have we communicated? And how can we change our communication method, style, and information that we're sharing to enhance everybody's learning style so that they understand how the program is going to work for them moving it forward. Once you get used to it, start using it, it is slick. The user interface is great. But then again, I'm getting on a soapbox, and it's almost time to go. So I'll be quiet, but thank you. If you need to talk, feedback, if you want to, and this is for anybody that's on the call, right? We've gone through it. It was a chore, but we got a whole bunch of lessons learned that we'd love to share so you don't make the same mistakes we did.
David, you mentioned your peak conference, and speaking of that, when I was talking about AI earlier, at the peak conference, I ran into a lady who said to me, and this is kind of true of technology in general, since that's the topic of today's webinar. She said to me that she was terrified of AI. She used that word. And so I would just say this to anyone on the call. Technology is not something to be terrified of. She used that word in particular. I think terror is something that you feel watching a scary movie, right? Or if you have a phobia of spiders or something, snakes or something like that, right? It's technology. It's not going to fall into your face like in the
Right.
alien. So it's something that you can empower yourself with the knowledge of, and this is what I told her about AI. It's not something to be terrified of. Rather, it is something that you can empower yourself with the knowledge of, which is why I provided so much information, so many links to articles, blogs, other websites, so many resources, because I would want you to have the information about it so that you don't feel terror, so that you do have the information. And knowledge is power, right? You feel empowered because you know that it's not going to come marching into your room at night and grab you. It is a tool that you can use to learn how to do things in a more efficient way, and make things that you do every day easier. Remember, the dot matrix printer took all day to print one document. The LaserJet printer printed things so nicely and quickly. So it's just that leap forward in the processes, the things that you do every day. It's not a thing to be afraid of. It's a thing to learn about how you can use to your advantage. That's what I'd say. And that's what I said to her that day. And then we hugged and everybody was happy again.
Yeah, that's a very familiar experience, Talise. Coming from the IT background proper, that was a part of the job, was to bring down anxiety for those that, like, we were actually going places where they didn't have a computer in their office at all. So it was a lot of anxiety of, what is this, and why do I have to use it? How little can I use it? So so sometimes it's a harsh transition, and then you get comfortable finally with it, and you're like, I know this, and then you want to change it on me. So it can be frustrating as well when things change and you have to learn a new way of doing things, and they don't necessarily work the way you expect them to right away. But that's why working together as a collective and addressing all the different things that might come up, and as David was saying, having those interactive conversations and checking back in to make sure that things are going well, and if they're not, what can be done about those things, just to have a as smooth and comfortable and complete a transition as possible for everyone involved.
Indeed. Well, all right, friends, that concludes today's presentation. I want to thank our guest speakers, Tajan and David, for the valuable information and the expertise that they've shared today, and for working with us here at NASPO to bring it to you. And I want to thank all of you for attending this webinar today. You will receive a follow-up email today containing the slides that you saw today. Remember, this webinar qualifies as one contact hour for your CEUs or continuing education credits. To receive your certificate, simply fill out the survey in your browser window once you've exited the webinar. This webinar has been recorded and will be available for viewing on the NASPO YouTube page in the coming days. Any questions entered into the chat and the Q&A boxes have been saved, and we'll try to follow up via email for any that were not addressed during the presentation. Don't forget to check out the upcoming events at NASPO.org. Our REACH conference is our next event, so if you haven't already registered, the deadline is fast approaching. It is this coming Friday, June 14th at 11:59 p.m. Thanks again to you all, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.